I used to work the night shift at a huge, dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of town. The warehouse is enormous, with rows of towering shelves filled with boxes. The aisles between the shelves are narrow and dark, and the only light comes from the few flickering overhead lights. A couple of months ago, on a random Tuesday night, I was working alone again, and something terrifying happened. I started my shift like normal, checking the inventory. The place was super quiet, with only the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak from the wind blowing. I walked up and down the aisles, scanning the shelves. Apart from guarding the warehouse, my job was also to check and tidy shelves. As I made my way to the back of the warehouse, I noticed something strange. Some of the boxes in shelving block E27 where all the large electronics are stored were out of place. This was unusual, as it wasn't just an unfinished job from the previous shift. The boxes were not piled and stacked in order. I figured there must be a new guy working the forklifts who does not understand the system yet and got things messed up, but I decided to investigate. I moved closer, shining my flashlight on the boxes. There was a chill in the air, and I had a sudden feeling that something wasn't right. I started noticing shadows, as though there was movement on the other end of the warehouse. I told myself it's just my imagination, but the feeling was so real I felt my neck tingle. I took a deep breath and tried to focus on making sense of the mess. That's when I heard a faint rustling sound coming from one of the aisles. I stopped and listened, but the sound was gone. I shook my head, trying to ignore the growing unease. I decided to come back to fix the mess later and to check out the rest of the warehouse first. As I moved through the aisles, I was more alert, my eyes darting around, looking for anything unusual. Suddenly the power flickered, and all the warehouse lights went out with a thud. My flashlight became my only source of light, and I could feel my heart beating as I tried to keep it steady, lighting the area around me. The place felt even more ominous now. I decided not to jump to conclusions as I continued to investigate, now with just my flashlight guiding the way. I noticed more things out of place. Boxes that should have been stacked neatly were slightly askew, and a few items were scattered on the floor. I turned a corner and saw a glint of light reflecting off something on the ground. As I got closer, I saw it was shattered glass. My flashlight beam followed the trail to a nearby window, which had been broken. Someone had definitely snuck in. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead, and my grip tightened on the flashlight. I crouched down, keeping low to avoid being seen, and slowly scanned the area around the broken window. The darkness made everything look menacing, and every creak and rustle put me on edge. I knew I had to stay hidden and find out what was going on without making myself a target. I moved from shelf to shelf, using the stacks of boxes for cover. My footsteps were light, almost silent, but every sound felt loud in the quiet warehouse. I strained my ears, trying to pick up any hint of movement. As I decided to head back to the office to use the landline, I heard footsteps echoing from different directions. I froze and listened intently. Shadows darted between the aisles, and I realized this was real. I wasn't alone. I took my cell phone from my pocket to text my supervisor, but remembered that there is no signal in most areas of this warehouse. Keeping low, I carefully started making my way towards the office, sticking close to the shelves and avoiding open spaces. I kept my flashlight off as much as possible, only using it briefly to avoid tripping over anything. The office door was in sight, but the sense of danger was overwhelming. I knew I had to stay calm and get to the phone, but every step felt like it could be my last. I tried to stay hidden and to keep my breathing quiet as I moved through the aisles, but then I heard footsteps. The footsteps grew louder, and I saw the shadows getting closer. My heart was beating so fast, I felt like it might give me away. Suddenly, I heard voices. I peeked out and saw a group of men, armed and searching the warehouse. One of them spotted me. "Hey, you!" he shouted, and the others turned to look. I didn't wait. I took off running, weaving through the narrow aisles. The sound of their footsteps behind me was terrifying. I could hear them yelling to each other, trying to cut me off. I knew the warehouse better than they did. I ducked into a small gap between shelves, crouching down to catch my breath. The thieves ran past, but I knew it wouldn't be long before they doubled back. I needed a plan. I moved quickly, keeping low and using the shelves for cover. I could hear them getting frustrated, their voices angry. I made my way toward the loading dock, hoping to find a way out. But as I turned a corner, I saw two of them blocking the path. I was trapped. They closed in on me, their faces grim. I had never been so afraid, but also never felt so determined. I remembered the warehouse's alarm system. It was my only chance. I bolted towards the control panel, the thieves lunging after me. I reached the panel just as one of them grabbed my shirt. I twisted away, slamming my hand down on the alarm button. The warehouse was instantly filled with the blaring sound of sirens. The thieves flinched, looking around in panic. They knew the police would be here soon. I used the distraction to my advantage, slipping away from their grasp and running towards the main door. They hesitated, then fled, knowing they were out of time. I watched them disappear into the darkness as the sirens wailed. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights illuminating the dark warehouse. As soon as they entered, the sound of their radios and footsteps filled the air, replacing the eerie silence that had been so terrifying. I felt so relieved. The fear that had gripped me finally started to fade. A couple of officers came over to me asking if I was okay. I nodded, still shaken. They guided me outside to their patrol car and gave me a blanket to calm down. I told them everything that had happened, from the broken window to the chase through the aisles. Inside the warehouse, other officers were searching for the thieves. They found evidence of the stolen goods, boxes filled with electronics, jewelry, and other valuable items. It turned out these thieves had been using our warehouse as a storage spot for their loot. They had broken in, hoping to stash more stolen goods, but they hadn't counted on me being there. While I waited outside, I saw more police cars arriving. They set up a perimeter around the warehouse, making sure the thieves couldn't come back. After what felt like forever, an officer told me they had checked the whole building. The thieves were gone, but they had left behind enough evidence to track them down. Over the next few days, the police continued their investigation. They found fingerprints and other clues that led them to a nearby hideout. However, by the time they got there, these guys had already fled the area. Their exact identities remained unknown, and it seemed they had covered their tracks well. The warehouse was restored to normal. The broken window was repaired, and the stolen goods were cataloged as evidence. My boss thanked me for my quick thinking and bravery, but I decided to quit the job. The memories of that night were too intense for me to continue working there. In the end, the warehouse went back to being just a place for storage. But for me, it was a place where I faced a real-life nightmare and came out on the other side. The fear had ended, but the lessons I learned about staying calm under pressure stayed with me. Last summer, I worked the night shift at a remote gas station along a deserted highway. My name is Chris, and I took this job to save up for my dream road trip. Most nights were quiet, with only the occasional trucker stopping by to fill up and grab a coffee. One night, around midnight, a car pulled up. A man with a nervous look on his face got out and asked to use the restroom. Something about him made me uneasy, but I nodded and pointed him to the back. He quickly disappeared into the restroom. A few minutes later, another car screeched to a stop in front of the station. A woman jumped out, looking frantic and terrified. She ran up to me, breathless, and said that the man who just went inside was her ex-boyfriend. She said he had been stalking her for months and begged me to call the police. I was caught off guard by her panic. My hands shook as I tried to calm her down. I reached for the phone behind the counter, but it was missing. I realized the man must have grabbed it on his way to the bathroom. The woman told me how her ex had been following her on the road for the last 2 hours. He had just sped past her to come into the gas station first. She didn't want to keep driving on this lonely road by herself, because she had no idea what he was up to, but knew he was capable of the worst. I decided to check on the man in the restroom. When I got there, it was empty. Panic set in as I realized he could be hiding anywhere in the station. The woman was close behind me, urging me to help her because she feared what her ex might do if someone didn't intervene. I knew I had to find him before things got worse. The woman's fear and the urgency of the situation made everything feel more dangerous. I headed to the office to check the surveillance footage, hoping to find out where he was hiding. I watched the surveillance footage, my hands still shaking. I saw the man hiding in the storage room, crouched behind some shelves. I knew I had to do something. I grabbed a wrench from the tool shelf, the cold metal heavy in my hand. "Stay here," I told the woman. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. I moved quietly towards the storage room, my footsteps barely making a sound. The darkness back there made everything more intense, and every creak on the old tile floor sounded like a thunderclap. I reached the door and took a deep breath. As I opened the door, the man lunged at me, knocking the wrench out of my hand. We struggled violently, his fists swinging wildly. He punched me hard in the ribs, and I felt a sharp pain. I fought back with all my strength, using my elbows and knees. The confined space made it hard to move, and I could smell his sweat and desperation. He grabbed my arm and twisted it, trying to force me to the ground. I managed to elbow him in the face, but he kept coming at me. He pushed me against the shelves, and I felt a canister hit the back of my head. Stars danced in front of my eyes, but I knew I couldn't give up. With a burst of energy, I kicked him in the shins and grabbed the wrench again. He swung at me, and I ducked just in time. My heart was pounding, and I could feel blood trickling down my forehead from where the canister had hit me. Finally, I managed to hit him on the head with the wrench. He went limp and collapsed to the floor, unconscious. I was panting, my heart racing from the adrenaline. My whole body ached from the fight, but I couldn't stop now. I ran to the convenience store and grabbed a roll of duct tape. I quickly tied the man's hands, feet, and mouth, making sure he couldn't move or yell. I found my cell phone and used the emergency battery pack to call the police. I explained everything to the dispatcher, but I worried they might not arrive before the man regained consciousness. We were so remote, and it could take them a while to get here. Just then, a trucker pulled into the gas station. The woman and I both ran outside. The trucker was this tall, big man, and as he walked towards us, I felt a sense of relief. This was just the support we needed. I ran towards him, explaining the situation as quickly as I could. Skeptical at first, he asked if we were playing some kind of trick on him. I had to think quickly, and got the idea to offer that he tie the woman and my hands behind our backs while he checked the restroom, where he would see I was telling the truth. Luckily, that worked as he looked me straight in the eyes, could see I was sincere, and just said, "Wait here," while he went inside to have a look. He came out and agreed to help. We carefully loaded the unconscious man into the back of the trucker's cab, making sure the duct tape was secure. The trucker's big hands and calm demeanor made us feel safer. The woman and I got into her car and followed the trucker down the highway to the nearest police station, which was 45 minutes away. The drive felt like forever, every bump and turn making me more anxious. When we finally got to the police station, the man was awake and the officers took him into custody. They praised me for my quick thinking and bravery. The woman, whose name was Lisa, thanked me over and over, tears streaming down her face. Both of us thanked the truck driver over and over as well, and after giving his statement, he continued on his way. While we waited at the station, Lisa told me more about her ex-boyfriend. She had been in an abusive relationship with him for years. He had controlled every aspect of her life, isolating her from friends and family. When she finally managed to leave him, he started stalking her, showing up at her work and home, sending threatening messages, and following her everywhere she went. She had been living in fear for so long, always looking over her shoulder. The police took her statement and mine, and we were both given a ride to our homes. Before we left, one of the officers mentioned that they were going to run the man's fingerprints and DNA through their system. They said it was standard procedure but might take some time to get results. A few weeks later, I received a call from the police. They wanted to thank me again for my help that night. It turned out that the fingerprints and DNA tests had revealed something shocking. The man we had captured was the murderer of his former partner, a crime that had occurred 10 years ago. The case had gone cold, and the family of the victim had been left without answers. Until now. The discovery of his identity brought the missing evidence the police needed to finally solve the case. The family of the murdered woman could finally have some peace, knowing that justice was being served. The news hit me hard. I realized how close Lisa and I had come to being his next victims. It also made me think about how fragile life is and how important it is to stand up against evil. After that terrifying night, I did take the road trip I had been dreaming about. The open road helped me clear my mind and think about what I wanted to do with my life. The experience at the gas station had a profound impact on me. I had played a part in bringing a dangerous man to justice, and it felt like I had made a real difference. When I returned from my trip, I decided to go back to school to study forensics. I wanted to help solve crimes and bring justice to victims and their families. Knowing that I could use my skills to make the world a safer place gave me a new sense of purpose. The memory of that night at the gas station would always stay with me, but it had also set me on a new path. I was determined to make the most of it and use my experience to help others. Last summer, I worked the night shift at a remote train station that only operates at night. The station is usually quiet, with just a few passengers catching the last train of the night. One night, during a heavy storm, the power went out. The wind howled outside, and the rain battered the windows, making the station feel even more isolated. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, and began my routine check to ensure everything was secure. The station felt different that night. The usual hum of the lights and machines was replaced by an eerie sound of heavy rain, broken only by the occasional rumble of thunder. Still, I tried to go about my work routine as usual. I moved from the ticket booth to the waiting area, checking the doors and windows, making sure they were locked. As I walked past the train schedule board, I noticed something strange. The board, which I had to operate manually, showed an unscheduled arrival. This wasn't supposed to happen. I felt a knot form in my stomach, curious and slightly uneasy. I decided to check the logs in the office, but there was no record of any additional trains. Just then, I heard a distant sound, like a train approaching. I started to feel completely creeped out. I walked back to the platform, shining my flashlight on the tracks, but they were empty. The sound grew louder, yet no train appeared. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something was definitely wrong. I decided to investigate further. The storm raged on outside, and the wind whipped through the station, making the doors creak and the windows rattle. I felt a sense of unease growing with each step I took, my mind racing with questions. What was causing that sound? And why was there an unscheduled train on the board? As I continued to explore, I started feeling that I wasn't alone in the station. Every little noise made me jump. I knew I had to stay calm and figure out what was going on, but the darkness and the storm somehow made me feel like I was in some kind of danger. As I continued to explore the dark, empty station, I heard footsteps approaching. My flashlight beam landed on a man in a conductor's uniform. He looked official, but something about him felt off. He claimed to be from the mysterious train and insisted that I help him retrieve a package from one of the storage rooms. My instincts screamed that something was wrong, but I nodded and agreed to follow him. As we walked, I discreetly reached for my walkie-talkie and quietly alerted the station's security guard. "There's a strange man here. Something's not right. Meet me at the storage room," I whispered, hoping the guard would understand and come quickly. The man led me down the narrow, dark hallway toward the storage room. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the tension building. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, the wind howling and rain pounding against the windows. The flickering light from my flashlight cast eerie shadows on the walls. The station, normally so quiet and empty, now felt like a trap closing in on me. Just as we reached the door to the storage room, the security guard arrived. The man in the conductor's uniform saw him and realized he had been caught. In an instant, he lunged at me, trying to escape. The guard jumped in to help, and a violent struggle ensued. The man was strong and desperate, swinging wildly at both of us. His eyes were wild, filled with a terrifying determination to break free. The man managed to knock the guard to the ground and grabbed me, dragging me with him as a hostage. My heart raced as I struggled to break free, feeling his grip tighten around my arm. The guard, despite his injuries, got up and tackled the man. They fought fiercely, each blow echoing in the empty hallway. The man punched and kicked with brutal force, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. I spotted a heavy object on a nearby shelf and grabbed it. With all my strength, I swung it at the man's head. He let out a grunt and collapsed, unconscious. I stood there, panting and shaking, trying to process what had just happened. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins, and my hands trembled. The guard quickly searched the man's pockets and found identification. He was an escaped convict using the uniform to hide his identity. We also discovered a small speaker in his pocket, which he had used to play the sound of the approaching train, creating confusion and fear. The realization of how close we had come to being seriously hurt, or worse, sank in. The guard and I tied up the unconscious man and called the police. As we waited for them to arrive, the storm outside finally began to calm. But the tension in the air remained. The fear and danger of the situation lingered, leaving us both shaken. When the police arrived, they took the convict into custody and praised us for our quick thinking and bravery. The whole experience left me deeply affected, knowing how close we had come to a tragic ending. The station, which had once been a quiet place of work, now felt like a scene from a nightmare. The guard quickly searched the man's pockets and found identification. He was an escaped convict using the uniform to hide his identity. We also discovered a small speaker in his pocket, which he had used to play the sound of the approaching train. He had planned everything to create confusion and fear. We managed to tie up the unconscious man and call the police. As we waited, the storm outside began to calm, but the tension in the air was still thick. The fear and danger we had just faced were still fresh in my mind. When the police arrived, their flashing lights lit up the dark station. They quickly took control of the situation, securing the convict and asking us what had happened. They praised us for our quick thinking and bravery. The officers explained that the man had escaped from a nearby prison where he had been serving time for robbery and assault. He had been on the run for weeks, and they had been searching for him without much success until now. The police took our statements, making sure to get every detail of what happened. They examined the storage room and found more evidence that the convict had been hiding there for some time. It was clear he had been planning something dangerous. After the police left with the convict, the train station manager arrived. He was very concerned about what had happened and thanked us repeatedly for our bravery. The manager decided that changes needed to be made to ensure this never happened again. First, they increased security measures at the station. New cameras were installed, and alarms were set up to alert staff of any suspicious activity. They also decided that 2 workers would be scheduled for night shifts instead of just 1. This way, no one would have to face a situation like this alone again. I thought a lot about whether I wanted to continue working at the station. The memory of that night was terrifying, but I felt a strong sense of responsibility. I realized that I wanted to help make the station safer for everyone. The new security measures and having a partner during night shifts made me feel more secure. I also decided to take self-defense classes to be better prepared in case anything like this ever happened again. The incident made me more cautious and aware of my surroundings. I knew that even in a quiet job, danger could lurk in unexpected places. My colleagues and even the local community praised me for my bravery. It felt good to be recognized, but the real reward was knowing that I had helped capture a dangerous man and made the station a safer place. The memory of that night will always stay with me, but it taught me important lessons about being vigilant and prepared. It made me stronger and more confident, knowing that I could face danger and come out on the other side. I decided to stay at the train station, not just for the job, but to ensure it remained a safe place for everyone.